Gently open your eyes. Once again, a good morning to all of you. Uh, Dear friends, today we will start with the new text, that is the text of Yoga Sutra, very well known as Yoga Darshana, or also you can say Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. When we say Darshana, that means it is a part of the Darshana Shastra. When we talk about the Darshana Shastra, it becomes very important for all of us to understand the philosophical beginning. Okay, how come this whole theory of Darshan Shastra came into existence? Because there was very clear understanding of theistic and atheistic beliefs. There was a bifurcation, or you can say categorization, where Astika Darshan and Nastika Darshan were created. Astika Darshan means the Darshan Shastra which believes in Vedic culture or Vedic literature or Vedas. Nastika Darshan Shastra literally means the one who do not believe in Vedas, or the concepts of Vedas were not accepted by them fully. They did agree on some, but they did not agree with full. And as we all understand, ever since the human race existed on the earth, they have exhibited a special characteristic, the characteristics of which my professor used to very well say, the characteristics of head and heart. So the person who is having the characteristics of head and heart will always be looking around with eyes full of wonder, you can say. अगर सूरज को देखे, चांद को देखे, तो कहे कि इनको किसने बनाया? स्टार्स, गैलेक्सीज, ये नदियां, these mountains, various forests around us, the oceans. Even you can just imagine regularly how we experience the change of the seasons or the cycle of seasons. How come this so many innumerable creatures are there around us? How come we are experiencing a universe which is full of variety? So man always wanted to know more and more and more and more about what he saw, what he experienced. And this kind of desire or this kind of inquisitiveness made the man or the human race to do certain kind of investigations into, you can say, the nature of phenomenal world. And when this kind of investigation was done, this led an individual to understand the origin of the physical sciences, all the physical sciences which we are experiencing in today's scenario. Whichever science you say, medical science, architectural, commercial, any science. Earlier, in the ancient days, our sages also studied the universe and various aspects about the existence of the universe. We do have the science of astronomy, the science of mathematics, which we say that which is developed in India. And as the time passed, the sages wanted to have a concrete base of these existential experiences. And to attain that, they turned their vision inward. It is like, they started investigating into the nature of an observer rather than the observed. They were a lot into thoughts, and their thought process used to be comprising of the questions like who am I, what is life, what is this world, what has organized this wonderful universe, who might have created this, or simply saying who is behind this eternal laws of the universe, as we were discussing about the change of the season, the sunrise, the sunset, the moon coming in. And all these experiences were revealed in the Vedas, and how they used to go into that meditation, profound meditation, and used to connect the happenings of the nature into the Vedas. As we all know that we have these four Vedas: Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, Atharvaveda was the later addition, and there are Upavedas like Dhanurved, Ayurved, Shilpaved. Six Upavedas are there. And in these Vedangas, the Samhita, the Brahmanas, the Aranyaka, the Upanishads. And the beautiful things were the Upanishads out of this way, which is like, the end part or the end portion of the Vedas. These Upanishads were like, discussing the depth of the fundamental questions that we were discussing. Who am I? What is this whole universe? Who has organized this, or who has created this? And these fundamental questions related to human life, you know, made the great rishis to put their own view into proper Darshana Shastra. And when we talk about Nyaya Sutras, the writer was Gautama Rishi. When we talk about Vaisheshika, the writers were Kanad Rishi. Sankhya, as we all know, Kapila Muni, or the Maharishi Kapila. Yoga, Patanjali; Mimamsa, Jaimini; Vedanta, We talk about Badarayana Vyasa. Even the concept of Vedanta coming in the form of Prasthanatrayi, the three medium through which to understand the reality. And these three mediums were the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Brahma Sutra. So all these things were there in front of us. And they were discussing in detail the purpose of human life, the relationship between man and the nature. And of course, there was a lot of discussion on the problems, or you can say miseries, afflictions, and how to overcome these problems, how to find a systematic way to come out of and get relieved out of these problems. And that term became liberation, mukti. And there were many mukti upayas coming in front of us. Our Shiva Samhita talks about the mukti upaya as satya, tapa, danam. Many more are there. So all these things were brought about by various authors in their work. And you know, that was the time when knowledge was understood to a great level by having discussion, by having debates, by refuting. If you're not agreeing with the other person's version, you used to refute it. And both of them used to come to a particular conclusion ki what should be the answer. So Darshan Shastra literally gives an outline of not only the problem, but the cause of the problem, the remedy to the problem, and how the application of the remedy can be done. The most beautiful thing which I would like to say here, in every Darshana Shastra, you will see whether if even if it is Jainism and Buddhism, the concept of virtue or values, and at the same time meditation. And meditation was something which was part and parcel of the yoga. So how the yogic aids were brought about in order to let the meditation happen. So you can say simply that amongst the six systems of the Darshana Shastra or the Indian philosophy, Shad Darshan जिसको हम कहते हैं, a very scientific, systematic, practical text were revealed. And in that, the one treatise that we are going to understand and talk more about is about Patanjali Yoga Darshana. Many a times, this philosophy word comes as love for knowledge. I should tell you, friends, in our Eastern culture, India, China, philosophy was never a mere speculative inquiry. More than inquiry, it was a way of life. And that is the reason every individual's understanding of the subject was taken as darshana. Darshan literally means to see, but to see with a vision of an individual and trying to understand the subject to its deeper meanings, or you can say a doctrine that helps one to see and experience the reality is nothing but the Darshana Shastra. I'm emphasizing Darshana more because we need to look at yoga as a darshan shastra only when we are studying Patanjali's Yoga Darshan. The whole spiritual process of knowing the truth or experiencing the reality is like, with that three core values of Jnana Yoga, and that is Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasa. Shravan is like going through the listening or hearing of the scriptural knowledge, which is coming out from the mouth of the teacher, the guru. And Manana like is doing introspection or focusing or concentrating, or even you can say meditating on what has been revealed in those scriptures. And literally, Nididhyasan was like the application, putting into practice of whatever Shravan and Manan was done, putting it into practice and experiencing the truth. So here we should say that the study of Patanjali Yoga Darshan really means not only the practice of yoga in day-to-day life, but at the same time making yoga as a way of life to know the truth. And we can say that yoga is a science that brings moksha for us, or that liberates. We should always understand the whole concept of knowledge and practice, particularly with the understanding of the Mimamsa school, the Mimamsa Darshana Shastra written by Jaimini. He divided it into two categories, Karma Kanda and Jnana Kanda. Karma Kanda is to carry out various deeds in our day-to-day life. In fact, uh, as we understand from the yogic texts, we come across in Shiva Samhita, I recollect, it is categorized into two, Nisheda Karma and Vidhi Puraka Karma. Nisheda Karma will take you towards doing sin and it will put you into hell. So the concept of hell and heaven is here in Karma Kanda. And Vidhi Puraka Karma, if done properly as Nitya Karma, Naimittik Karma, and there is even Kamya Karma. Kamya Karma, that is Sakama Karma, which is with desire of getting something as fruits. Today in the morning we were discussing about that you cannot say no to the fruits. One understanding is very clear. When we talk about Sangam Tyaktva, it is not that we are not experiencing the fruits. We are experiencing the fruits. But at the same time, we are not getting attached to them. See, I am happily married, having kids. But being a family man doesn't mean that I boast about my family. Hey, it is like my responsibility, which is my dharma, leading me to perform artha and kama. But at the same time, I am not making these things as weaker side of my existence. I'm able to get along with them in such a beautiful manner that I am on the path of moksha. So Sangam Tyaktva is literally, it is not like not to be attached, but it is like going through the fruits, but not experiencing the taste of the fruit. And it is said in our many yogic texts, a yogi or a person who has attained to that level, he tastes things without understanding the sweetness or any other kind of taste in it. Things become tasteless to him, and the actual taste he is experiencing in that tastelessness is the taste of spirituality. So परफॉर्मेंस ऑफ ऑल द राइट्स, जैसे हम नैमित्तिक कर्म बोलते हैं ना, रिलीजियस राइट्स, द थ्रेड सेरेमनी, द मैरिज सेरेमनी, karmas leading to worldly happiness, and karmas with the scope or aspiration of attaining heaven after death. Said and done, the class realizing that worldly pleasures and heavenly abode are just transitory, and they wanted to have a permanent solution to the experiences of this karma kanda. And these experiences in Sankhya Karika, actually, we come across as Tapatraya, Adi Bhautik, Adi Daivik, Adhyatmik. And they literally wanted to get liberated from this Tapatraya, from this cycle of birth and death. And this knowledge of overcoming the suffering or the problematic situation or the miseries, the subject was known as Jnana Kanda. And in Mimamsa also, it is clearly explained that Jnana Kanda is supposed to be followed in Karma Kanda. So when you are doing karma, you have to do with lot of Jnana, with that approach that I am not getting attached to what I'm, but I am doing my duty. I'm not getting attached to what I'm doing, but I'm doing it as my dharma. And that became the path of knowledge. And to tell you, friends, the foremost among all these great rishis was the Maharishi Kapila Muni or Kapilacharya. And we have gone through in our Bhagavad Gita also, which says that the Kapila Muni is the greatest among all these sages. And as we were understanding the Vedic sacrifices, the yajna, which were meant for fulfillment of desires or attainment of heaven, sages like Kapila Muni advocated the practice of Jnana Yajna. What is that Jnana Yajna? It is like an understanding wherein, which is like not the self is to be sacrificed in the fire of the knowledge. A spiritual aspirant, through his intellectual state of viveka, through discrimination, comes to an understanding that he is not the body, nor the mind, not the senses, not the ego, the intellect. I am not this, I am not this. Idam na mama, the thing that we come across in the Darshana Shastra, and who will forget that Nirvana Shatakam written by the great Shankaracharya. I am not this, I am not this, this is not me, this is not me. So here Kapila Muni, with his understanding, also comes with this Jnana Yagna to the conclusion that the self which we are talking about, the eternal existence that we are talking about, is the truth, is the reality which is existing within. We can say that the sages realized that the knowledge of the world around is built upon our sensory understanding of the same, our perception, which is interpreted by our mind, received by our mind, analyzed by our intellect, and of course, evaluated by our ego. All this decides whether or not the data which is received is worth to store in the memory or not. Friends, what we can call as knowledge is nothing but the mental images and the concepts which are drawn from the interaction of the mind and the senses with this Maya, or you can say with this external world. The knowledge thus acquired is obviously with our likes and dislikes, isn't it? So we can say that it is conditioned. And this conditioned knowledge, as per our text, has been said, is nothing but the knowledge of avidya, the false knowledge, or you can say the English word nescience. The great people have talked about avidya a lot. Some people said the knowledge which is not true is said to be avidya. It is avidya doesn't mean the knowledge which is not existing. No, 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 not at all. It is a knowledge which is not the true knowledge. That is avidya. जैसे कि एक एग्जांपल मैं देता हूं, ये भी हमने टेक्स्ट में से पढ़ा, मैंने जो आप लोगों को जो शेयर किया उसमें द ग्रेट ऑथर मिस्टर यार्दी सेज यू टेक द सैंपल ऑफ अ मित्र. So mitra is a friend and amitra is not a friend. So avidya is knowledge, but at the same time, vidya is knowledge, but at the same time, avidya means it is a knowledge which is not the true knowledge. It is a type of knowledge. So the world is also a knowledge. Obviously, it is a knowledge, but at the same time, it is not the ultimate knowledge. So what is the ultimate knowledge? What is that knowledge which is the source of all the knowledge that which exists within? So to declare and know that knowledge, it was understood that if one knows the self, everything else is known. That is the ultimate knowledge. This knowledge of the self by which everything else is known is truly within. And the whole thing is coming to us through the Sankhya metaphysics. This Yoga Darshan and Sankhya Darshan are said to be sisterly philosophies. The Sankhya metaphysics written by the great Maharshi Kapila goes on to give us an understanding of two eternal principles. And we are all aware of it. Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha is the principle of consciousness and Prakriti is the principle of matter. When we talk about this Jagat as per Sankhya, this Jagat is like the result of the contact between the conscious principle and the matter principle, Purusha and Prakriti. So you can say Purusha as the subjective side and Prakriti as the objective side of the nature. Here, one can understand, because lot has been spoken about the karana behind this whole universe. And Prakriti is a material cause of the universe, which is known as the Upadan Karana or Upadan Karana. And Purusha is the efficient cause of the same. Efficient cause, Nimitta Karana. So according to Sankhya, all that exists in the universe is the combination of Purusha and Prakriti, the spirit and the matter, the consciousness and the matter. And we all know how Prakriti is made up of or consists of the three gunas, the Sattva, the Raja, the Tama. These are the basic forces of the universe, friends. Literally, these are the basic forces. When we say Sattva is the force that enlightens, illuminates, or harmonizes, Rajas is the force of activity, which is responsible for all the activities around, whether it is physical, mental, and Tamas is the force of inertia. So we can say that the gunas are of the nature of pleasure, sattva, pain, the activity, and restrain, the tamas. And aren't we experiencing all the three? So sattva, raja, tama, in combination, the experience of the pleasure, pain, and the delusion or inertia. This combination of the three, as we all know, they serve a purpose. Purpose in a person's being intellectual or illuminated, purpose in a person's behavior to be very active, person being very restrained, or you can say sluggish. So they are mutually existing in the form of dominating or supporting. Of course, they are togetherly productive and cooperative. When we are talking about these three gunas, one should understand, unless and until the essence of Purusha is coming in contact with Prakriti, what is the state of the three gunas? They are in the perfect state of balance. In fact, Prakriti is in the state of non-manifestation, or you can say unmanifested state. And this unmanifested state is known as Avyakta Prakriti, or you can say Moola Prakriti or Pradhana Prakriti. See, this introduction is very important for us to understand the Yoga Shastra, which we are entering into now, the Yoga Darshana Shastra, which we are entering. So, when we say that Prakriti at its state of perfect balance, when nothing is dominating, it is known as Avyakta, unmanifested, Moola Prakriti. And when Prakriti comes in contact with Purusha, the state of perfect balance is lost. And that is when the Prakriti starts evolving, the evolution starts. As per Sankhya, Purusha and Prakriti, if they are taken as two, coming together and starting with the evolution, then from Mahat up to the ultimate Panchamahabhuta, there are 23 evolutes, including Prakriti and Purusha, we come across 25. So Mahat is nothing but intellect, Maha, so the higher intellect you can say, and Buddhi, individualized you can say. Asmita the I consciousness, the ego, connected with mind, giving rise to five sense organs, five organs of actions through which the whole interpretation of the experience of the world is understood. And towards the tamasic side, if this is on the sattvic side, the sense organ, the mind, as well as the organ of action. The other side, it is the pancha tanmatra giving rise to the pancha mahabhuta. The pancha tanmatra, shabda sparsha, rasa, shabda sparsha, rupa, rasa gandha. The five elements, shabda, akash, sparsha, vayu, rupa, agni, rasa, jala, and when it comes to gandha, the earth. So the five elements there. So the whole five elements, gross elements, five subtle elements, 10, mind 11, along with Panchanyanindriya, Panchakarmendriya 21, Asmita Mahat becoming 22, 23, and Prakriti Purusha 24, 25. So according to Sankhya, both the mind as well as the matter, they are the derivative of Prakriti. They are coming out of Prakriti. Mahat or intellect or buddhi being the first product of the evolution of the Prakriti is always dominated by the Sattva Guna. Mahat, the intellect, the discriminative power, the Viveka, is said to be comprising of Sattva Guna. Whereas the mind, the senses, the Panchanyanindriya, the Panchakarmendriya are dominated by the Rajoguna. Hence, they are full of activities. And you can say that this is the reason behind the mind being always chanchala. In Hatha Pradipika, when we were going through that fourth chapter, Rasasya Manaschaiva Chanchalatva Sabhava. So mind is depicted as a chanchal swabhava. And when you talk about the five elements, they are dominated by tamoguna. So the physical body, the matter of our existence, is dominated by tamoguna. So we need to understand the intellect and its connection with the mind and the senses and with the body in order to cultivate that kind of a proper existence there. And when we are talking about Sankhya, friends, the word Sankhya literally means numbers, or you can say counting, Sankhya. At the same time, Sankhya also means knowledge. When we talk about counting, just now I have made you all the principles born out of Prakriti. So that is the counting. 24 principles along with Prakriti. When we talk about knowledge, Sankhya is knowledge also. You can say it is reference to the knowledge of the self, knowledge of the Purusha. How that reference to the knowledge of the Purusha will come to us? Of course, with the right discrimination through the intellect itself. So Prakriti plays a very vital role to know the Purusha itself. In Sankhya Karika, friends, the right knowledge of the four principles that we are talking about, the 24 tattva, the right knowledge of the 24 tattva itself will lead us to wisdom. Wisdom of making us understand, okay, I am not this body. Nothing is mine. I do not belong to anything else. And which in turn leads you to connection with the absolute, that is the knowledge of the self. And having the knowledge of the Purusha, knowledge of the self, is nothing but the state of Kaivalya, or the liberation, or the moksha, you can say. That is what is attained. So, a journey, now we are in the state of evolution, isn't it? A journey of involution from, Sankhya Karika says it very clearly, a journey of involution from the evolutes, going within and knowing the self, coming to the Purusha, is nothing but Kaivalya. When Sankhya is telling this all as knowledge, Yoga tells this very same thing as aids to that knowledge. And that is the reason the two systems, the philosophy of Sankhya and that of the Yoga, they are regarded as twins. If Sankhya is to be taken as science, then literally the technology is Yoga. So all the technical things you will get in yoga, and all the scientific understanding, the thinking, the knowledge will come to you in that of Sankhya. So based on the theoretical background of this knowledge of Sankhya, which is provided by Sankhya, Patanjali Muni systematically elaborates the whole practical methods that is supposed to be adopted in order to isolate the Purusha from Prakriti. In the second chapter, when after going through the law of karma from shlok number 12 to 15, and the 16 says heyam dukkham anagatam. So heya, that is to be avoided. And what is to be avoided is the union of the two. So what is the union of the two? The contact between the Purusha and Prakriti. And this contact of Purusha and Prakriti is said to be because of avidya. So this union, where Prakriti appears to have acquired the consciousness in the form of the chitta, where mana, buddhi, and ahankar are functional. So for us, we need to understand the universal consciousness can be individualized as chitta. जैसे हम बोलते हैं ना ब्रह्मांड पिंड, if we are taking this body as the mirror image of the whole universe, the pinda, the body as the mirror image of the brahmanda, then literally we should understand that chitta is nothing but the mirror image of the universal consciousness. And being a product of Prakriti, the chitta continuously goes into changes. It undergoes various changes or modifications because of the gunas. And we all know these modifications of the chitta are nothing but the chitta vrittis. Our all mundane experience in this worldliness is due to chitta vrittis only. So you can say this chitta is the antahakarana, or the internal organ or internal instrument responsible for cognizing, responsible for our desire, our willing, our feeling, and retaining of the worldly experience. So here, Patanjali Muni, using this word chitta in an all inclusive sense, is referring to manaha buddhi ahankar. And you can go ahead and take, as the chitta is now, because of this manaha buddhi ahankar becoming the storage of the memory itself. So manaha buddhi ahankar and memory also. Mind, ego, intellect, and memory. So here what we are saying, different modes in which a consciousness functions in this human being. So one thing is becoming very clear here, that chitta is nothing but acquired consciousness. When we say chitta is an evolute of Prakriti, it is the more functional, more active, more ignited evolute of Prakriti with the combination of Manaha, Buddhi, and Ahankara. Many a times, this chitta is referred to as mind. It is the limitation of the English language to call chitta as mind, or sometimes it is also called as mind stuff. So when we are talking about the chitta in English, we should say mind stuff or mind, or chitta means the stuff of consciousness, that consciousness out of which the thought, the will, the memory, the emotion, the desire, all the sensations, they arise, we experience. And this is nothing but the chitta vrittis, the modifications of chitta, or we can say the movements of chitta. So thus, friends, both mind as well as matter are the derivatives of the Prakriti. There is dominance of sattva in mind, and there is dominance of tamas in that matter. And therefore, mind is the most suitable, or chitta is the most suitable vehicle for yoga sadhana. And that is the reason, friends, Patanjali Muni is the whole talk about psyche, the state of mind, the state of chitta. And that is the reason he goes on to define yoga as yoga chitta vritti nirodha, cessation of modification of mind or fluctuation of mind. And when this state is achieved, it is said that the chitta becomes pure, like a perfect mirror in which Purusha is getting reflected in its natural pure state. So here we need to understand the whole yoga sadhana is like an essence for this purification of chitta. हमारी जितनी भी साधना, अब सुबह रोज आप उठते हो, सूक्ष्म व्यायाम करते हो, सूर्य नमस्कार करते हो, आसन का प्रैक्टिस करते हो, प्राणायाम का प्रैक्टिस करते हो, आंखें बंद करके उसमें सेटल होने की कोशिश करते हो, व्हाट इज दैट? It is nothing but the purification of the chitta. And the concept of chitta prasadanam that we get in our in the first chapter itself is nothing but purification of chitta. And for that we are applying so many cleansing processes. Somewhere we are doing chantings of Om, somewhere we are doing Kriya Yoga, somewhere we will be doing the following of the Yama Niyamas, the restraints and observances. Somewhere we will be going for the practice of the Abhyasa Vairagya initially. Somewhere we will be going for the practice of Ashtanga Yoga. So all this is nothing but a systemic organization to prepare this chitta for concentration, which is like organizing the mind, which can be brought about in a state of samatva, equilibrium. And that same equilibrium has been spoken about in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So here, in a yogic manner, there is a progressive understanding of a knower getting connected with the known through the knowledge. और इसको शब्दों में कहा जाता है गहित्रु ग्रहण ग्राह्य, which leads, when these three become one, which leads to the state of samadhi. This samadhi, which is a state of super consciousness, that is where we come across the experience of the ultimate wisdom, Ritumbra Prajna. Many a times I have spoken about this while talking about the Hatha Pradipika concepts. And this wisdom, which is full of knowledge, overflowing with supreme truth, is known or understood as Sabija Samadhi, the Samadhi with Bija. When all the impressions or the sanskars or the sanskaras which bring about the modification of the chitta are ceased or eliminated, that state is known as Samadhi. When this knowledge of Ritumbara Pratnya is acquired through the purification or the purgatory process of the yogic aids, when we come across the impression which is created by this Ritumbara Pratnya, and when this impression, this very impression is also eliminated, you can say that the aspirant, the seer, goes beyond the knowledge. In fact, he attains what is known as Nirbija Samadhi, of course, going through Dharma Mega Samadhi, जो हम चौथे अध्याय में पढ़ने वाले हैं. And then the yogi becomes the universal truth, becomes one with the Purusha, or else till then the Purusha is caught up in the, what you can say, the forces of the Prakriti. There, with its involvement with the Prakriti, is needed to be isolated. So when through this process of yoga, the Purusha isolates to get established in his natural state, or the individual isolates himself to come to that Purusha Tattva, that is nothing but Kaivalya. That is called as Swarupa Avastha. That is where we call the Purusha to be eternally liberated. And that sense of bondage due to non-discrimination between self and Prakriti, due to avidya. Avidya is non-discrimination. Is the experience of the material world or the matter. And when vidya comes in, the realization of the self takes place. So all this is because of this yogic aids. In one way, yoga differs from Sankhya is the understanding of the concept of Ishvara. Though we say the whole metaphysical foundation of Yoga Darshan is provided by the Sankhya philosophy, in the first chapter itself, Patanjali Muni has introduced the concept of Ishvara, which is not accepted by the Sankhya. And that is the reason that yoga is also called as Sheshwara Sankhya, Sa Ishvara Sankhya. We can always say that Patanjali's Ishvara, some authors say, and some authors refute also. So there is an understanding of the subject itself that Ishvara is not God, as we normally understand. But Ishvara, as explained in Yoga Sutra, is a special Purusha. Klesha karma vipaka ashayai aparamrishtaha, not affected by any afflictions or actions or fruits therein. He is omniscient. Guruhu Kalenana Vachidat, master of all masters. Beyond the time, beyond the limitation of the time, he is. So, with the acceptance of Ishvara, the yoga also brings us in front of us the path of devotion, the bhakti yoga. And literally in Kriya Yoga, when we talk about tapaha, swadhyaya, Ishvara pranidhan, which is going to be explained in the second chapter, tapaha, karma yoga, lot of hardship, responsibilities. Swadhyaya, jnana yoga, introspection, concentration, focus, analysis, self-analysis. And Ishvara pranidhan, surrender to God. So, surrender to God itself will lead to samadhi. That's what has been said by Patanjali in both first chapter as well as second chapter. Ishwar Pranidhana Dwa, Sutra number 23 of the first chapter, and in the 45th one of the second chapter. So here, when he says Samadhi Siddhir Ishwar Pranidhana, it is becoming clear for us how Patanjali Muni is trying to be making an approach in an integrative manner. So you can say kind of integral yoga we are experiencing here. And to tell you friends, the whole Yoga Sutra has been written in the form of sutras, aphorisms. It is like presenting the knowledge in a very condensed form. Maximum knowledge is imparted in minimum numbers of letters or words, you can say. And care has been taken to see that a proper meaning is conveyed and that there is no ambiguity. And thanks to the great commentators like Vyasa, Vachaspati, Mishra, where this simple sutra, which means thread or the combination of threads, here it means a kind of combination of thoughts, cohesive formation of thoughts put forth in a proper streamlined manner, sequential manner. Just as a thread is used to tie the flowers, make a garland, in the very similar manner, a thought stream can be understood as connected through in this sutras, through the form of these sutras. And literally the great authors have told us always that these sutras are like mantras which are supposed to be reflected upon, meditated upon, to come to the true meaning. Because we find so many variations in the interpretations. So a task is given to the aspirant, a student, to take one sutra and reflect on it, and to arrive at a conclusion with the true meaning of the same. And this whole Yoga Sutra has been written or revealed in the form of 195 sutras. If you see, the first chapter consists of 51, the second 55, the third 55, and the fourth one is consisting of 34. The first commentary on the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, written by the great Vyasa Muni, I don't know whether he is the same Badrayana Vyasa or Veda Vyasa, but at the same time, it is said sometimes he is talked about a third one. So in Vyasa Bhashya, he has come to the understanding of explaining us the Chitta Bhumis, the states of Chitta. Or we can say that he compares Chitta to the flow of the water in the river. And he says that Chitta is that river which flows towards worldliness as well as it flows towards liberation. If we take an individual and his lifestyle, he will be decided upon by his pulls towards the desires, or you can say gravitational pulls to the various aspects of this universe or towards this earth. So while experiencing, he goes through various sufferings also and keeps on moving as he goes through this kind of suffering in the cycle of birth and death. But when, according to Vyasa Bhashya, we understand yoga sadhana as a practice working against the gravity, it is a current which is traveling upward, not towards the gravity, towards down. And that is the reason that we have been advocated by Patanjali Muni the concept of abhyas and vairagya, the understanding of continuous practice and renunciation as two inevitable understanding or solution to attain that cessation of the vrittis, or we can say the part and parcel of yoga sadhana, where abhyasa generates a necessary energy required to go beyond the gravity, and vairagya ensures they both go hand in hand. Vairagya ensures a necessary detachment causing lightness so that the upward movement becomes possible. अगर हमने बैगेज कर्म का अगर कभी कर्माशय जिसको हम कहते हैं अगर वो ढोया हुआ है हमारे कंधे पर, तो हाउ वी विल बी इजीली गोइंग अपवर्ड फ्रेंड्स? We will be pulled down, isn't it? Very simple. So vairagya is like getting rid of this kind of baggage. So renunciation as well as practice, both are important. Last 5 minutes I would like to say, because we are already at 11:35. Yoga darshan is divided into 4 parts, friends. Samadhi pad, sadhana pad, vibhuti pad, and kaivalya pad. As the yoga is defined in the first chapter, the chitta vrittis have been explained. How these chitta vrittis can be brought under control has been told, and how there are obstacles, chitta vikshepas in it, and how these obstacles can be managed with chitta prasadanam, and how sabija and nirbija samadhi can be experienced. All these things are coming to us in the first chapter itself. When we talk about the second chapter, known as sadhana pada, the chapter of practice, one can understand the first chapter was for the spiritual, already spiritual people, means uttam sadhaka, who have already reached to a higher level. And when we come to sadhana pada, you can connect it to the beginners, where Patanjali Muni opens up the chapter of Kriya Yoga, the preliminary practice required to enter into the field of yoga itself. And he goes on to discuss the 5 afflictions, or you can say the kleshas, and how kleshas are the root cause of the human suffering, and how to make our inward journey through this practice of Kriya Yoga, which is literally going to help us later on to practice Ashtanga Yoga, to bring about that kind of perfection in that inward journey of attaining oneness with consciousness. That is the Ashtanga Yoga. Then, friends, we come across the third chapter. In the second chapter, also, we come across the law of karma and the Chaturvyuha, the four understanding of the whole, you can say, the base or the foundation wherein all this has come into existence. Heya, heya, hetu, hana, hanupaya. And all this understood with the Ashtanga Yoga. Bahiranga part discussed in the second chapter. The Antaranga part is discussed in the Vibhuti Pada, the third chapter. Vibhuti itself means super powers, paranormal powers. And these powers are attained by the practice of Sanyama. This Sanyama is nothing but the combined practice of Dharana, Dhyan, and Samadhi, which is nothing but Antaranga Yoga. And in the same Vibhuti Pad, he goes on to give us a warning that if you are expecting this siddhis only as the final goal of your practice, then beware that you will not be able to reach the purpose of yoga. In fact, you are getting stuck into the selfish approach. And in the fourth chapter, friends, we are coming across the explanation of how the mind functions. What is the nirmana chitta, or you can say the artificial mind? What are the four karmas? Shukla karma, Krishna karma, Ashukla, Akrishna karma of a yogi, or people like you and me having Shukla as well as Krishna karma belonging to us, because we are affected with the vasanas, isn't it? So how to eliminate these vasanas, overcome the karmas, come to a state of Ashukla, Akrishna karma, where we will be experiencing the Dharma Mega Samadhi, which leads to the state of Nirbija Samadhi, which is nothing but the state of Kaivalya, where the individual consciousness merges with the cosmic consciousness, you can say. So in all these four chapters, the great Patanjali Muni has described in detail the inward journey of the consciousness. And from next Sunday onwards, friends, this inward journey is going to start by going through each and every sutra by sutra, which may lead to the discovery of the self. If we are regularly reflecting, and as Sunil Bhai suggested to me, Sabir Bhai, you should define the sutras that we are going to discuss in each and every class, so that we all will read and understand them with whatever material available with us, and then we will have a proper talk on it. So friends, this is how we will be understanding the whole Yoga Sutra. This introduction was essential because we need to connect how yoga is a Darshana Shastra, how yoga is connected to Sankhya, and how yoga is a practical Sankhya, which is bringing about the change in our approach towards life, and we are understanding the self, coming in oneness with the self. Here we can have some discussion. You were quietly listening to me so nicely. I could see Ashutosh sir very intently, not even blinking his eyes, and listening to me very earnestly.
So
That
it was
was
a
beautiful, sir.
wonderful introduction, Sabir Bhai. Thank you very much. I
Thank you.
have two
Thank
questions.
you very much.
Two questions.
Ji.
When
Haan.
can we understand Mahat as laws of nature? Because in everyday usage and in scientific terms, they say laws of nature are there. So can we say Mahat is equal to laws of nature?
When we are understanding with that kind of discriminatory agency, you can say very well, true. See, the whole life, what are we doing, sir? We are Mahat, you can say collective buddhi, collective conscious buddhi, you can say. And at the individual level, we can say a singular buddhi. So my buddhi may be adapted to tamasic vritti. So it is not functional at all. So naturally, the law of nature, the Sattva, Raja, Tama, plays a very vital role in coming to the understanding of the Mahat. There, of course, regular practice goes on bringing about this kind of understanding of distinctiveness between right and wrong, good and bad, high and low, pleasure and pain. And this distinctness says okay, if this is something which connects you to the nature, then you should go beyond this material nature to what is the true nature of yourself. And that is what the Mahat does. What you say is right. Yeah.
Second question is, when Shankaracharya says Atma Tattva, is he referring to Purusha?
No.
No.
He is different. He's different. He is talking about Atma Tattva as Brahman. Whereas Purusha, when we are talking according to Sankhya, we are talking about dualism. But Shankara is talking about Advaita. So there his Atman is connected to only Brahman, and everything else
Okay.
is mere projection of the same.
Okay.
Everything else is Maya, he says.
Everything else is Maya, he says. This is
Right.
one of my favorite subjects. So I don't know
Thank
how
you.
much I will be able to do justice to it, but we will be going through it sutra by sutra and understand it more deeply. And Ashutosh sir, your help will also be needed, because this is the time when I'm coming across a student who is understanding Sanskrit to a great level, and somewhere your involvement will also be important.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Samir bhai, because especially in Sutra, the terminology used, because this is fairly antiquated, like the Gita. In Hat Pradipika, etc., these are all just 200, 300, 500-year-old texts. So the Sanskrit terminology is pretty much means, what it is understood today, or not very significantly different. But in these texts, since they are 5,000 years old, what was then understood from a certain term, right? Jugupsha, for example, it will come. So there, now they translated it as disgust. It's not disgust, it's disillusionment. Right?
Yes.
So, sir, I think maybe what Savya is trying to say is that just like in the Gita, could you then be reading the Sutra in Sanskrit? And then we can...
Yes. So these are like one-liners.
Short, actually. Sutras are
And
very
sir?
short. So
correct.
Short.
no problem. I can do that. But in Gita, the verses are a little longer. Sutras, I can do that. That's not a problem. Yeah.
That is not going to be an issue. But at the same
Yeah.
time, the concept of shloka and sutra is different.
Yeah.
The shloka has to be understood with a proper perfect meters. And
Yes.
sutra doesn't have any limitation of